Hercule Poirot's darkest case. You never knew about. Chapter 1. The Darkness Begins. The rain fell in relentless sheets over London, cloaking the city in a grey shroud that seemed to seep into the very bones of its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot sat by the window of his immaculate flat at Whitehaven Mansions, his small, precise hands folded over a cup of tisane. The warmth of the drink did little to dispel the chill he felt, not from the weather, but from a peculiar unease that had settled in his mind. His friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, sat opposite, engrossed in the evening paper, oblivious to the detective's quiet disquiet. "Mon ami," Poirot said at last, his voice cutting through the patter of rain, "do you not find it curious, this restlessness that comes when the world grows too still?" Hastings lowered his paper, eyebrows raised. "Restless, Poirot? You? I'd say you're just bored without a case to sink your teeth into." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Perhaps, Hastings, but the little grey cells, they do not rest. They whisper of something dark, something that waits." Hastings chuckled, ready to dismiss the remark as one of Poirot's theatrical flourishes, when a sharp knock at the door silenced him. The sound was urgent, almost desperate, cutting through the cosy hum of the flat. Poirot's green eyes sharpened, and he gestured for Hastings to answer. At the threshold stood a young woman, drenched from the storm, her dark coat clinging to her trembling frame. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a fear that seemed to pulse in the air around her. In her gloved hand she clutched a crumpled envelope. "Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oui, c'est moi," Poirot replied, rising with a grace that belied his unease. "Please, mademoiselle, come in. You are in distress, no?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting pursuit, then stepped inside. Hastings took her coat, and Poirot guided her to a chair by the fire. She sat, clutching the envelope tighter, her knuckles white. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she began, her words halting. I need your help, Monsieur Poirot. I've heard you can solve the impossible." Poirot inclined his head, his gaze fixed on her. "The impossible is merely a puzzle waiting for order, mademoiselle. Tell me, what troubles you?" She swallowed, her eyes darting to the envelope. 3 days ago, I received this. It came to my lodging house. No sender, no address, just my name written in black ink. She held it out, and Poirot took it with delicate fingers, noting the elegant, almost menacing script, "Miss Eleanor Vance." Inside was a single sheet of paper, its message brief but chilling. "You cannot escape what is written in blood. The truth will find you, and it will not be kind." Poirot's brow furrowed as he read it aloud, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "And you have no notion of who sent this, or why?" "None," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "But there's more. Last night I found something outside my door, a photograph, old and faded, of a house I've never seen. And on the back—" She reached into her purse, producing a small tattered image. It showed a Gothic manor, its windows dark like empty eyes. Scrawled in the same black ink were the words, "You were here." Hastings leaned forward, his usual scepticism giving way to intrigue. "Good Lord, Poirot, this sounds like a threat, or some sort of cruel prank." "No, Hastings, Poirot murmured, his eyes narrowing as he studied the photograph. "This is no prank. There is intent here, a purpose. Mademoiselle Vance, this house, does it stir any memory, however faint?" Eleanor shook her head, tears welling. "I swear I've never seen it. But since that note arrived, I've felt watched, as if someone knows me, knows things I don't even know about myself." Poirot set the photograph down, his mind already turning. "You were right to come to me, mademoiselle. This is a matter most grave. I, Hercule Poirot, will take your case." As Eleanor nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face, the rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like a warning. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with the certainty that this was no ordinary mystery. Something dark, something buried, had begun to stir, and he would not rest until he uncovered its truth. Chapter 2. A Mysterious Invitation. The following morning the rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air in London remained heavy, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Hercule Poirot sat at his desk, the cryptic note and photograph from Eleanor Vance laid out before him like pieces of an incomplete puzzle. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, hovered nearby, sipping coffee and watching Poirot with a mix of curiosity and impatience. "You've been staring at that note for hours, Poirot," Hastings remarked, setting his cup down. "Any grand revelations from those grey cells of yours?" Poirot's moustache twitched, but his eyes remained fixed on the photograph of the Gothic manor. "Patience, mon ami. The little grey cells, they do not rush. This house, this message, they speak of a past that Mademoiselle Vance does not yet know. But someone knows. Someone wishes her to remember." Before Hastings could respond, a sharp rap at the door interrupted them. It was Mrs. Todd, Poirot's housekeeper, holding a silver tray with a single envelope. "This came for you, sir," she said, her tone tinged with disapproval at the early disturbance. "Delivered by hand, no less." Poirot took the envelope, his fingers brushing over its fine cream paper. His name was written in the same elegant, menacing script as Eleanor's note. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He opened it with care, revealing a card inside, its text formal yet ominous. "You are cordially invited to Blackthorn Hall this evening at 8 o'clock. The truth awaits. Come alone. No signature, no address. Only the name of the place, Blackthorn Hall, and a small map sketched in ink, marking a location some miles outside London." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest, though a shadow of caution lingered. "Good heavens, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed, reading over his shoulder. "This is madness. You can't possibly go to some mysterious manor based on an anonymous invitation. It smells like a trap." "Perhaps, Hastings," Poirot said, folding the card with precision. "But a trap. It reveals as much about the one who sets it as the one it seeks to catch. No, I must go. The answers to Mademoiselle Vance's fear lie at this Blackthorn Hall," Hastings protested, but Poirot was resolute. By late afternoon, he had arranged for a car and contacted Eleanor Vance, instructing her to remain safe at her lodging house under the watch of a trusted associate, Inspector Japp, whom Poirot had roped into the matter with some reluctance. As dusk fell, Poirot set out alone, the car winding through fog-draped countryside until the silhouette of Blackthorn Hall loomed ahead. The manor was exactly as the photograph had promised. A brooding pile of stone, its towers clawing at the sky, its windows dark and unwelcoming. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Poirot adjusted his overcoat, his cane tapping the gravel drive as he approached the massive oak door. Before he could knock, it creaked open, revealing a tall, gaunt figure in a butler's uniform, his face pale and expressionless. "Monsieur Poirot," the man said, his voice a low rasp. "You are expected." Poirot inclined his head, undaunted. "And to whom do I owe this gracious invitation?" The butler did not answer, merely gesturing for Poirot to follow. Inside, the hall was a labyrinth of shadows, its walls lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow Poirot's every step. The air grew colder as they ascended a grand staircase, the silence broken only by the distant howl of wind. At last, the butler led him to a vast drawing-room, where a fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting flickering light over a group of figures seated around a long table. There were 5 of them, each as distinct as they were unsettling. A stern-faced woman in widow's black, her fingers drumming on a cane, a young man with a nervous laugh and darting eyes, a middle-aged couple, their faces etched with strain, and an older gentleman with a scholar's stoop, clutching a leather-bound book. They turned as one to face Poirot, their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and something darker, fear, perhaps, or guilt. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," the widow said, her voice sharp as cut glass. "I am Lady Margaret Ashford. We have been expecting you." Poirot bowed slightly, his keen eyes scanning each face. "And yet, madame, I do not know why I am here, nor who has summoned me. Perhaps you will enlighten Hercule Poirot." Lady Ashford's lips thinned, but before she could speak, the young man burst out. "It's about the curse, isn't it? That's why you've come. The blood debt of Blackthorn Hall." The room fell silent, the fire's crackle suddenly deafening. Poirot's moustache quivered, a sign of his heightened interest. "A curse, you say? Most intriguing. But I am here for truth, not superstition. Tell me, what is this blood debt?" The scholar cleared his throat, his voice trembling. "It is a story, Monsieur Poirot. A story of betrayal, murder, and a vow that has haunted this house for generations. And now, it seems the past has returned." As the words hung in the air, a distant scream pierced the night, echoing through the manor's walls. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, his mind racing. The darkness he had sensed was no longer a whisper. It was here, in this room, and it was only beginning to reveal itself. Chapter 3. The First Sign of Death. The scream still echoed in Hercule Poirot's ears as he stood in the flickering light of Blackthorn Hall's drawing-room. The assembled company froze, their faces a gallery of shock and dread. Lady Margaret Ashford's cane clattered to the floor. The young man, introduced as Charles Renwick, paled to a ghostly white, and the middle-aged couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, clutched each other's hands. Only the scholar, Dr. Edmund Lyle, moved, his trembling fingers tightening around his book as he muttered something unintelligible. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Ashford said, her voice regaining its steel, "that was no trick of the wind. We must investigate at once." "Oui, madame," Poirot replied, his tone calm, but his eyes alight with purpose. "But we proceed with order. No one leaves this room until I say. Monsieur Renwick, you will accompany me. The rest remain here." Charles Renwick nodded jerkily, his nervous laughter replaced by a swallow of fear. Poirot, cane in hand, led the way out of the drawing-room, following the direction of the scream toward the manor's upper floors. The butler, who had lingered silently in the shadows, offered no assistance, his gaunt face unreadable as they passed. The staircase creaked underfoot, each step amplifying the oppressive silence that had settled after the scream. The air grew colder, the scent of mildew stronger, as they reached a long, dimly lit corridor, lined with heavy doors. At its far end, one door stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the floor like a wound. Poirot paused, his sharp senses attuned to every detail, the faint drip of water somewhere, the uneven rhythm of Charles's breathing behind him. "Courage, monsieur," he murmured, then pushed the door open. Inside was a small bedroom, its furnishings austere but elegant, as if preserved from another era. A single candle burned on a nightstand, its flame guttering in an unseen draught, and there, sprawled across the floor, lay a woman in a maid's uniform, her eyes wide and lifeless, her throat marked by a thin, brutal line of red. A pool of blood spread beneath her, stark against the polished wood. Charles gasped, stumbling back. "My God, she's dead!" Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the wound without touching it. "Oui, monsieur. Murdered, and not long ago. The blood is still fresh." His gaze swept the room, noting the undisturbed bed, the absence of any weapon, and a single detail that made his moustache quiver. A small torn piece of paper clutched in the maid's hand. With delicate precision, Poirot extracted the fragment. It bore a few words in the same black ink he had seen before. The debt must be paid. The rest was missing, ripped away as if in a struggle. "Who was she?" Poirot asked, rising and fixing Charles with a piercing stare. Charles shook his head, his voice unsteady. I think her name was Clara, one of the maids. I barely knew her. I only arrived yesterday, I swear." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, filing away the young man's agitation for later scrutiny. He moved to the window, which was locked tight, its latch rusted from disuse. "No one entered or left this way," he murmured. "The killer, they are still among us." Returning to the drawing-room, Poirot found the others as he had left them, though tension crackled in the air like static. Lady Ashford stood by the fire, her composure fraying, while the Harrows whispered urgently to each other. Dr. Lisle sat, apart, his book now open, his lips moving silently as if reciting a prayer. "There has been a murder," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the room's unease. "A maid, Clara, lies dead upstairs, strangled with a message in her hand that speaks of a debt. I ask you now, who among you knows of this debt and why it claims lives?" A chorus of denials erupted, each voice more insistent than the last. Lady Ashford claimed ignorance. Of any maid's business, the Harrows swore they had no connection to Clara, and Dr. Lisle stammered that he was merely a guest studying the manor's history. Yet Poirot's keen eyes caught the flickers of deceit, the way Mrs. Harrow's fingers twisted her wedding ring, the sweat on Dr. Lisle's brow, the way Lady Ashford avoided his gaze. "Enough," Poirot said, raising a hand. "The truth. It hides, but not for long. Hercule Poirot will uncover it. But I warn you, silence protects no one when death walks these halls." As he spoke, a low groan sounded from the walls themselves, as if Blackthorn Hall were alive and protesting its secrets. Outside, the drizzle had turned to a storm, lightning illuminating the manor's grim facade. Poirot's mind raced, connecting the maid's death to Eleanor Vance's cryptic note, the photograph, and the invitation that had brought him here. The darkness was no longer a shadow. It was a force, and its next move was coming. Chapter 4. Poirot's Investigation. The storm raged outside Blackthorn Hall, its thunder rattling the ancient windows as Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his small, precise figure commanding the attention of the shaken group. The Dickon of Clara's murder had fractured their fragile composure, and now suspicion hung over the room like a fog. Lady Margaret Ashford gripped her cane, her eyes darting between her fellow guests. Charles Renwick paced near the fire, muttering to himself, while Mr. and Mrs. Harrow sat rigid, their faces pale. Dr. Edmund Lyle clutched his book tighter, as if it could shield him from Poirot's scrutiny. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and deliberate, "a young woman lies dead, and the truth of her death lies within this house. I, Hercule Poirot, will find it, but I require your cooperation. Each of you will speak with me alone. Refusal will only deepen my curiosity." Lady Ashford bristled. "This is outrageous. You accuse us, guests in my home, of such a vile act. Your home, madam?" Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Yet you claimed earlier to be merely a visitor, like the others. A curious contradiction, non?" Her lips parted, then closed, her silence louder than any protest. Poirot nodded, satisfied for now, and turned to the butler, who had reappeared soundlessly at the door. "You, monsieur, will ensure no one leaves this floor, and you will bring me Clara's belongings, everything she owned." The butler bowed, his expression as unreadable as ever, and departed. Poirot began his interviews in a small study off the drawing-room, its walls lined with dusty books and a single cracked mirror reflecting the firelight. He started with Charles Renwick, whose nervous energy seemed ready to burst. "I swear, I didn't know her," Charles blurted before Poirot could ask a question. "I came here because of a letter, like yours. It promised answers about my family, something about my grandfather, who died years ago. I thought it was a lark, a chance for a free weekend." Poirot leaned forward, his green eyes gleaming. "And this letter, monsieur, where is it?" Charles fumbled in his pocket, producing a crumpled note. The handwriting matched the others. Black ink, elegant, menacing. "Come to Blackthorn Hall. Your legacy waits." No signature, only the same sketched map Poirot had received. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, pocketing the note. "And Clara? Did you see her before tonight?" "Only in passing," Charles insisted, wiping sweat from his brow. "She served tea yesterday. Quiet girl, kept her head down." Poirot dismissed him, noting the tremor in his hands. Next came Mrs. Harrow, whose composure cracked the moment she sat down. "We didn't want to come," she whispered, glancing at the door. "My husband got a note, said it was about a debt we owed. We thought it was a mistake, but It mentioned our son, Robert. He died 10 years ago. How could anyone know? Poirot's moustache twitched. This note, madame, may I see it? She hesitated, then handed over a folded paper, its message chilling. Blackthorn Hall holds your debt. Pay, or Robert's shadow will follow. The ink, the script, identical, one by one. Poirot questioned the others. Mr. Harrow echoed his wife's story, his voice gruff with suppressed grief. Dr. Lyle admitted to receiving a similar note, hinting at a scandal tied to his academic past, though he refused to elaborate, citing personal matters. Lady Ashford was last, her demeanour icy, as she claimed her invitation spoke of family honour, but offered no note, insisting she had burned it. Convenient, madame, Poirot said mildly, though his eyes betrayed his scepticism. The butler returned with a small wooden box, Clara's possessions. Inside were a few coins, a worn prayer book, and a locket. Poirot opened it to find a tiny photograph of a young girl no older than 10, with Eleanor Vance's eyes staring back. His breath caught. Could Clara have been connected to his client? And if so, why had Eleanor not mentioned her as Poirot closed the locket? A faint creak came from the corridor. He stepped out, cane in hand, and caught a glimpse of a shadow slipping around a corner. He followed, moving with surprising speed for a man of his stature. But the figure was gone, leaving only a single black feather on the floor, a deliberate clue or a taunt. Returning to the drawing-room, Poirot addressed the group. "Someone in this house plays a dangerous game," he said, holding up the feather. "Clara's death is but the first act, and I suspect it ties to a past you all share, whether you admit it or not. Tell me now, what is the blood debt of Blackthorn?" "Hall?" Silence answered him, but Poirot saw the cracks. Mrs. Harrow's trembling lip, Dr. Lyle's furtive glance, Charles's clenched fists. The storm outside roared louder, and Poirot knew the night was far from over. The little grey cells hummed, piecing together the notes, the feather, and Clara's locket. The darkness was closing in, and he was determined to meet it head-on. Chapter 5. The Challenge of an Old Secret. The fire in Blackthorn Hall's drawing-room had dwindled to embers, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe across the walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the tense gathering, the black feather still in his gloved hand, his piercing gaze sweeping over the faces before him. Lady Margaret Ashford sat rigid, her knuckles white around her cane. Charles Renwick's nervous energy had subsided into a sullen slump. Mr. and Mrs. Harrow clung to each other, their eyes haunted, while Dr. Edmund Lyle's fingers traced the edges of his book, as if seeking solace in its pages. The air was thick with unspoken truths, and Poirot intended to pry them loose. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding, "the feather, the notes, the death of Clara. They are threads in a tapestry of deceit. You claim ignorance of this blood debt, yet your fear betrays you. I ask again, what secret does Blackthorn Hall hold?" Dr. Lyle cleared his throat, his voice barely audible. "Monsieur Poirot, you push too far. Some things are better left buried." "Non, monsieur," Poirot countered, his moustache quivering with resolve. "A woman is dead. Secrets buried are secrets that kill. Speak, or I shall dig deeper still." "Chevaucheur." Scholar's shoulders sagged, and he glanced at the others as if seeking permission or absolution. "Very well," he said at last. "Blackthorn Hall has a history, one I've studied for years. 50 years ago, this house belonged to the Vance family. They were wealthy, influential, until tragedy struck." "Vance?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, the name sparking a connection to Eleanor. "Continue, monsieur." Lyle's voice grew unsteady. "There was a scandal. A child, a daughter, vanished one night. Some said she was kidnapped, others that she died. The family never recovered. Rumours spoke of a curse, a blood debt tied to a betrayal within their circle. The Vances abandoned the hall, and it passed to distant kin, but the stories lingered." Poirot's mind raced, the locket with Eleanor's likeness burning in his memory. And this child, what was her name? Lyle hesitated. No record remains. The family destroyed much of their history, as if to erase her. Lady Ashford's cane tapped sharply on the floor. "Enough of this nonsense, Edmund. Fairy tales won't help us now. That maid's death is a coincidence, nothing more." "Coincidence, madam?" Poirot turned to her, his tone deceptively mild. "Then explain why Clara held a fragment speaking of a debt. Explain the notes that brought us here, each tailored to your private fears." "None. This is no fairy tale. It is a plan, and someone in this room knows its purpose." Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed from above, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Charles leapt to his feet, his voice shrill. "What now? This place is cursed, I tell you." "Calm yourself, monsieur," Poirot snapped, already moving toward the door. "Hastings would say you jump at shadows, but I prefer to meet them. Come, all of you, we investigate together." Reluctantly, the group followed Poirot up the creaking staircase, the butler trailing behind like a spectre. The sound had come from the same corridor where Clara was found, and as they approached, a gust of cold air met them. One of the heavy windows at the corridor's end was smashed, rain pouring through the jagged hole. On the floor, amidst the glass, lay a small, leather-bound diary, its pages fluttering in the wind. Poirot retrieved it with care, noting the initials A.V. embossed on the cover. He opened it to a random page, his eyes scanning the faded ink. "They think I don't see, but I know. The debt is theirs, not mine. I'll make them pay, even if it takes a lifetime." The date was from 50 years ago, the handwriting frantic, but precise. "This belonged to a Vance," Poirot murmured, holding the diary aloft, "and it speaks of vengeance. Who among you knows of this A.V.? Mrs. Harrow gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It can't be. Arthur Vance. He was my uncle, but he died before I was born. He never spoke of a debt." "Your uncle, madame?" Poirot's voice sharpened. "Yet you claimed no tie to this house. Another lie, perhaps?" She flinched, tears welling. "I didn't think it mattered. We came because of the note, not some old family grudge." Poirot tucked the diary into his coat, his mind whirling. The initials, the child, Eleanor's locket. Pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. He turned to the group, his expression stern. "This diary is a key, but it is not the lock. Someone brought us here to face this past, and Clara paid the price for their game. I urge you, speak now, before another life is lost. As if in answer, the lights in the corridor flickered, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat before flaring back. In that moment, Poirot caught a glimpse of movement at the corridor's far end. A figure, cloaked in shadow, slipping through a door. He started after it, but the door slammed shut, and by the time he reached it, the lock was fast. Mon Dieu! Poirot whispered, his hand tightening on his cane. The old secret of Blackthorn Hall was no longer content to whisper, it was screaming, and Poirot knew he was running out of time to silence it. Chapter 6. The Web of Deception. The storm outside Blackthorn Hall roared with renewed fury, its winds howling like a chorus of restless spirits. Inside, the air was no less charged, as Hercule Poirot stood before the locked door in the shadowy corridor, the diary of A.V. heavy in his coat pocket. The fleeting glimpse of the cloaked figure had sharpened his senses, and he knew the game was shifting. Someone was orchestrating this night, weaving a web of deception that threatened to ensnare them all. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot said, turning to the group huddled behind him, their faces pale in the flickering light. The one who fled wishes us to believe they hold all the cards, but Hercule Poirot does not play another's game. We return to the drawing room, and there we will unravel this tangle. Lady Margaret Ashford's voice was sharp. You let them escape, Poirot. What good is your prattle if the killer roams free? Poirot's green eyes glinted. Escape, madam? No, they are trapped as we all are within these walls. Their flight only reveals their fear. Grumbling, the group followed him back downstairs, the butler trailing silently behind. In the drawing room, Poirot placed the diary on a table, its worn cover drawing every eye. He opened it again, flipping to a later entry. They thought I was gone, but I see them still. The child was only the beginning. The debt lives in their blood. The words, dated mere months before the diary's abrupt end, sent a chill through the room. This A.V., Poirot said, tapping the page, was consumed by vengeance. But who were their enemies? And why does their shadow fall on us now? He fixed his gaze on Mrs. Harrow, whose earlier mention of Arthur Vance lingered in his mind. Madame, you called Arthur Vance your uncle. What do you know of his life here? Mrs. Harrow's hands twisted together, her voice barely a whisper. Very little. My mother spoke of him rarely. He was troubled after his daughter vanished. He blamed his friends, his family, everyone. He died alone, raving about a curse. Troubled, you say? Poirot's moustache twitched. Or betrayed. This diary suggests he believed himself wronged. And you, Monsieur Harrow, did your wife's family ever speak of Blackthorn Hall? Mr. Harrow shifted uncomfortably. Only in passing. My father-in-law said it was a place of bad luck. He warned us never to come here. Poirot turned to Dr. Lisle, whose nervous fidgeting had not escaped his notice. And you, monsieur, the scholar of this house's history, what does your book tell of Arthur Vance? Lisle's fingers froze on the leather binding. I've read of him, yes. A recluse, driven mad by loss. My research focused on the architecture, not the scandals. Architecture? Poirot's tone was sceptical. Yet you carry that book like a shield. Open it, monsieur. Let us see what it hides. Reluctantly, Lisle obeyed, revealing not a history of buildings, but a collection of letters, clipped articles and notes in his own hand. One caught Poirot's eye, a faded letter signed A.V., addressed to an unknown recipient. "You took her from me, but I will take everything from you." Poirot held it up, his voice cutting through Lyle's stammered excuses. "You lied, monsieur. You came not for bricks and mortar, but for this, a trail of vengeance. Why conceal it?" Lyle's face crumpled. "I thought it was harmless. I found those papers in an archive, part of my studies. I didn't know they'd lead to this." Charles Renwick, silent until now, exploded. "You're all hiding something. I came here for answers about my grandfather, and now there's a killer loose. What if I'm next?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Enough, monsieur. Your panic serves no one. But you are right. There is a killer, and they are close." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, lingering on the butler, who stood by the door, his gaunt face impassive. "You, monsieur," Poirot said suddenly, addressing him. "You have been silent, yet you know this house better than any. Who is A.V., and why does their ghost haunt us?" The butler blinked, the first crack in his stoic mask. "I am only a servant, sir. I know nothing of ghosts. Yet you opened the door to a cloaked figure's escape," Poirot pressed. "Or perhaps you saw more than you admit." Before the butler could respond, a sharp cry came from Mrs. Harrow. She pointed to the fireplace, where a small object had fallen from the mantel. A child's locket, identical to the one in Clara's box, its clasp broken. Poirot retrieved it, opening it to find the same photograph. A young girl with Eleanor Vance's eyes. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot whispered, the pieces clicking faster now. "This locket, Clara's locket, the diary, they are tied to Eleanor Vance, and to this house. Someone here knows why." As he spoke, the room's heavy curtains billowed, though no window was open. A low, guttural laugh echoed from the shadows, sending Charles scrambling back, and Lady Ashford's cane clattering again. Poirot spun toward the sound, but the laughter faded, replaced by the storm's relentless roar. "The web tightens," Poirot said, his voice steady, despite the unease rippling through the group. "But I see the threads now. The killer believes they control this night, but they forget. Hercule, Poirot weaves his own trap." Chapter 7. The Truth Within the Heart. The air in Blackthorn Hall's drawing-room crackled with fear, the guttural laugh still lingering in the ears of the shaken group. Hercule Poirot stood resolute, the child's locket in his hand, its tiny photograph of a girl with Eleanor Vance's eyes glinting in the firelight. The storm outside battered the manor, but within a different tempest brewed, one of secrets unravelling and truths clawing their way to the surface. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, his voice a calm anchor in the chaos, "this locket is no mere trinket. It binds Clara, Eleanor Vance, and this house to a past that refuses to stay buried. Someone here knows its meaning, and I will have the truth, now." Lady Margaret Ashford's face was a mask of defiance, but her trembling hands betrayed her. "You accuse us blindly, Poirot. That locket could belong to anyone." "No, madame," Poirot countered, his green eyes locking onto hers. "It is identical to the one found among Clara's possessions. 2 lockets, 1 face, a girl tied to the Vance family. And you, who claimed no connection to this house, grow pale at its sight. Why?" Lady Ashford's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to the others, his gaze sweeping over Charles Renwick's fidgeting form, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow's haunted expressions, and Dr. Edmund Lyall's hunched posture, his book now discarded on the table. The butler stood by the door, his silence a shadow that Poirot had not forgotten. "Enough games," Poirot declared. "The diary of A.V. Arthur Vance speaks of betrayal and a child stolen. This girl," he held up the locket, "was that child, was she not? And her loss set this blood debt in motion." Mrs. Harrow broke first, a sob escaping her. "I didn't know. My mother told me Arthur's daughter was dead, taken by illness. I never saw her, never knew her name, but that face," she pointed to the locket, tears streaming. "It's like my cousin's from old photos. Could she have been alive?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind racing. "Your cousin, madam, or perhaps your sister. The truth within your heart begs to be heard." Inselbrey gripped his wife's shoulder, his voice gruff. "Leave her be, Poirot. We've told you all we know. My wife's family cut ties with Arthur Vance after the scandal. We thought it was over." "Over?" Poirot's tone was sharp. "Non, monsieur. It lives in the notes that summoned you, in Clara's blood, in the laughter that mocks us. And you, Dr. Lyall," he pivoted to the scholar, "your letters revealed Arthur's rage. Did you find more? Perhaps a name, a clue to this child's fate?" Lyall's hands shook as he met Poirot's gaze. I found rumours, nothing certain. Some said the girl was hidden away, others that she was killed to silence a secret. Arthur believed his closest friends betrayed him, stole her to cover their own sins." Charles Renwick, who had been silent, suddenly stood, his voice trembling with anger. "This is madness. My grandfather was one of those friends, James Renwick. The note said I'd learn his truth, but all I've found is death. If he was part of this, why am I here?" Poirot's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Because, monsieur, the past does not forgive. Your grandfather's name in Arthur's diary would explain much. But let us test this web further." He turned to the butler, who had remained a statue through the exchange. "You, monsieur, have watched and listened. What role do you play in this house's secrets?" The butler's gaunt face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his composure. "I'm William, sir. I serve Blackthorn Hall, as my father did. I know only what the walls whisper. Old pain, old wrongs. Whispers, you say?" Poirot stepped, closer, his cane tapping the floor. "Then whisper this. Did you see the cloaked figure? Did you know Clara beyond her duties?" William's eyes darted to the locket, then away. Clara was curious. She asked about the old family, the Vances. I warned her to let it be. As for the figure, I saw nothing. Poirot's gaze lingered, unconvinced, but he let it pass for now. He opened the diary again, flipping to a page he had marked earlier. The heart hides what the eyes see. I trusted them, and they took her. L.M., J.R., E.H. Their names are my curse. The initials struck like lightning. L.M. for Lady Margaret, J.R. for James Renwick, E.H. for a Harrow. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his voice low. The truth is here, in Arthur's words. These initials, Lady Margaret, James Renwick, perhaps Edward Harrow, point to a circle of betrayal. You were his allies, yet he named you enemies. Why? Lady Ashford's cane slammed against the floor. How dare you? I was no friend of Arthur Vance. I came here as a guest, nothing more. Yet your initials mark his pain, Poirot said, unrelenting. And you, Mr. Harrow, Edward, is it not? Did your family cross Arthur? Harrow's face reddened. My name's Thomas, not Edward. You're grasping at straws, Poirot. But Poirot was undeterred, his mind weaving the threads. Eleanor's note, Clara's locket, the diary's accusations. He was about to press further when a sharp crack split the air. Not thunder, but something closer, metallic. The group froze as the drawing-room door burst open, revealing the corridor beyond, now shrouded in darkness. A cold draught swept through, carrying a faint, acrid smell. Smoke! Fire! Charles shouted, pointing to wisps curling from upstairs. Poirot's heart quickened, but his voice remained steady. To the hall! Quickly! Stay together! As they rushed out, Poirot glanced back, catching William's eye, a look that held more than fear, perhaps guilt. The truth was close, beating like a heart beneath the house's stone. But the web of deception was tightening, and Poirot knew the next move could be his last. Chapter 8. The Final Discovery. The acrid scent of smoke grew stronger as Hercule Poirot led the group from the drawing-room into Blackthorn Hall's cavernous entrance hall. The storm's fury shook the manor, but the crackle of flames from above was a more immediate threat. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by flickering chandeliers that swayed in the draught. Lady Margaret Ashford leaned heavily on her cane, her face a mix of defiance and dread. Charles Renwick's eyes darted toward the grand staircase, while Mr. and Mrs. Harrow clung to each other, their breaths ragged. Dr. Edmund Lyle clutched his coat as if it could shield him from the unfolding chaos. The butler, William, lingered at the rear, his gaunt features unreadable, but his posture tense. Mon Dieu, Poirot said, his voice cutting through the panic. We must act with order. Monsieur Harrow, check the front door. Monsieur Renwick, find water, buckets, anything. The rest stay close. This fire is no accident. Harrow nodded, hurrying to the heavy oak door, only to find it locked, the key missing. It won't budge, he called, rattling the handle in vain. Charles hesitated, then dashed toward the kitchen, his footsteps echoing. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the hall, noting the smoke seeping from the upper landing. His mind raced. The diary's initials, the lockets, Eleanor Vance's photograph, and now this fire, all part of a design meant to trap or destroy. But whose design? William, Poirot said, turning to the butler. You know this house? Is there another exit? William's gaze flickered almost imperceptibly to a side corridor. The servants' passage, sir, near the pantry, but the fire may have spread. Lead us, Poirot ordered, his tone brooking no argument. As William guided them, Poirot kept the group close, his cane tapping rhythmically. The corridor was narrow, its walls damp and lined with faded portraits, their eyes seeming to follow the procession. Mrs. Harrow stumbled, and Poirot caught her arm, noting the terror in her eyes. Courage, madame, he murmured. The truth will protect us if we find it in time. They reached the pantry, where a small door led to the passage, but smoke was already curling under it. Charles returned, panting, with 2 buckets of Eiger water, his face streaked with soot. The kitchen's clear, but the fire's spreading fast upstairs. We haven't much time." Poirot nodded, then paused, his attention caught by a faint glint on the floor. A key, half hidden beneath a rug. He retrieved it, recognizing it as the front door's. "Curious," he said softly. "Someone wished us trapped, yet left this behind. A mistake or a lure?" Before he could ponder further, a crash resounded from above, followed by a shower of sparks as part of the ceiling gave way. Lady Ashford gasped, her cane slipping, and Poirot steadied her, his mind whirling. The initials LMJREH pointed to a betrayal 50 years ago, but the lockets tied it to Eleanor Vance, and Clara's death suggested a living avenger. The answer was here, in this house, among these people. "William," Poirot said sharply, "you warned Clara to avoid the Vance family secrets. Why? What did she find?" The butler froze, his mask cracking. She found papers, sir, in the attic, hidden in a trunk. Letters, photographs, things the Vances left behind. I told her to leave them, but she was stubborn." "Letters?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And where are these papers now?" William hesitated, then pointed to a narrow staircase at the corridor's end. "The attic! But the fire! We go!" Poirot declared, undaunted. "Monsieur Renwick, bring the water. The rest follow. The truth awaits us." The group climbed the creaking stairs, smoke thickening with each step. The attic door was ajar, heat radiating from within. Poirot pushed it open, revealing a vast, cluttered space lit by flames licking the far wall. Trunks and crates loomed like ghosts, and amidst them stood a single figure, cloaked as Poirot had seen before, holding a lit candle. "Enough," Poirot called, his voice ringing with authority. "Your fire will not hide the truth. Show yourself." The figure turned, and the hood fell back, revealing a face that drew gasps from the group. Eleanor Vance, her eyes blazing with a fury Poirot had not seen in their first meeting. Yet something was different. Her features were sharper, older, as if the girl he'd met had been a shadow of this woman. "You?" Mrs. Harrow whispered, clutching her husband. "But you came to Poirot." "Non," Poirot said, stepping forward, his cane raised like a sceptre. "This is not the Eleanor Vance I met. You are her twin, are you not? The child Arthur Vance lost, hidden all these years, now returned to claim your blood debt." The woman's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Clever, Monsieur Poirot. I am Abigail Vance, Eleanor's sister. Our father's friends betrayed us. Lady Margaret, James Renwick, Edward Harrow. They sold me to silence a scandal, left Eleanor to forget. But I remembered. Clara found my truth, so she died. Now this house, their legacy, will burn." Poirot's heart sank, but his resolve held. "And Eleanor? Where is she?" Abigail's smile faltered. "Safe, for now. She doesn't know what I've done, what I must do." The flames roared closer, and Poirot knew time was short. The final discovery was his. Abigail's vengeance, born of a broken heart, had woven this deadly web. But could he untangle it before the fire consumed them all? Chapter 9. Facing Justice. The attic of Blackthorn Hall was a furnace, flames curling up the walls as smoke choked the air. Hercule Poirot stood firm, his small frame silhouetted against the fire's glow, facing Abigail Vance. Her revelation as Eleanor's twin and the architect of the night's horrors hung heavy, but Poirot's mind was clear, his little grey cells weaving the final threads of the mystery. Behind him, the group, Lady Margaret Ashford, Charles Renwick, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, Dr. Edmund Lyle, and the butler William, stood frozen, their faces a mix of shock and guilt. The heat pressed closer, but Poirot's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Abigail Vance," he said, his tone steady, "you have woven a web of vengeance, but it is not justice. Clara's blood, this fire, the fear you've sown, they do not heal your pain. Where is Eleanor, and what do you intend?" Abigail's eyes, so like Eleanor's yet hardened by years of rage, burned with defiance. She clutched the candle, its flame dangerously close to a pile of old papers nearby. "Justice!" she spat. "They stole my life, Monsieur Poirot. Lady Margaret, James Renwick, Edward Harrow, they sold me to a cruel fate to protect their names. My father died broken. My sister grew up alone, believing I was dead. This house is their sin, and it will burn with them." Lady Ashford stepped forward, her cane trembling but her voice sharp. "Lies! I knew nothing of a child's fate. Arthur was mad, raving about conspiracies." "Silence, madame!" Poirot snapped, his gaze never leaving Abigail. "Your denials ring hollow. The diary named you, L.M., J.R., E.H., and your fear tonight confirms it. But, Abigail, you said Eleanor is safe. If you love her, end this now. Let us save her, save this house, before it is too late." Abigail's hand wavered, the candle's flame flickering. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Eleanor doesn't know me. They took that from us, too. I sent her the note, the photograph, to draw her here, but I couldn't face her. Not yet." Poirot's heart quickened, sensing a crack in her resolve. "Then face her now, mademoiselle, not with fire, but with truth. Clara's death was a mistake, was it not? She found your papers, your plan, and you panicked. Abigail's face crumpled, tears cutting through the soot on her cheeks. She was going to tell them. I only meant to scare her, but she fought and I didn't mean to kill her." A gasp rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "And the fire? Another mistake or your final act?" Abigail glanced at the flames, now licking the attic's beams. "I wanted them to feel my loss, everything gone, as mine was. But you're right. Eleanor doesn't deserve this." "Then help us," Poirot urged, stepping closer despite the heat. "Where is she?" Abigail hesitated, then pointed to a heavy trunk in the corner, its lid ajar. "There, I locked her in to keep her safe from the fire." Charles Renwick, spurred by panic or guilt, rushed to the trunk, wrenching it open. Inside lay Eleanor Vance, bound and unconscious but breathing, her face pale but unharmed. Mrs. Harrow cried out, helping Charles lift her free, while Mr. Harrow splashed water from a bucket to keep the flames at bay. Poirot turned back to Abigail, his expression stern but not unkind. "You have confessed, mademoiselle. Clara's death, the threats, the fire, all stem from your pain. But justice is not yours to mete out. Come with us, face the law, and perhaps find peace with your sister." Abigail's shoulders slumped, the candle slipping from her hand to the floor, where Charles quickly doused it. She nodded, a broken figure amidst the chaos she had wrought. Poirot directed the group to move, guiding them down the attic stairs as the fire roared behind. William, silent but swift, led the way to the servants' passage, the key Poirot had found earlier, unlocking a side door to the rain-soaked night. Outside, the storm had eased, the air cold and sharp. Eleanor stirred, coughing as Mrs. Harrow held her close. Abigail stood apart, her wrists now held by Charles, though she offered no resistance. Poirot watched them all, his mind cataloguing the night's truths. Lady Margaret's complicity, the Harrows' hidden ties, Charles's inherited guilt, Lyle's secrecy, and William's quiet knowledge of the house's sins. "The blood debt is paid," Poirot said softly, his voice carrying over the wind. "Not by fire or death, but by truth. Abigail, you will answer for Clara, but your story will be heard. And you," he turned to the others, "will face your consciences, if not the law." As the distant wail of sirens approached, summoned, Poirot later learned, by a villager who saw the flames, Blackthorn Hall burned, its secrets exposed at last. Justice, Poirot knew, was not always neat, but it was served when truth prevailed. Chapter 10. The End of Darkness. The dawn broke over the smouldering ruins of Blackthorn Hall, a pale light filtering through the dissipating storm clouds. Hercule Poirot stood on the wet grass, his overcoat damp, but his posture as impeccable as ever. The fire had consumed much of the manor, leaving charred stone and twisted beams where secrets had festered for decades. Around him, the survivors of the night's ordeal waited in a sombre cluster, their faces etched with exhaustion and reckoning. Eleanor Vance, wrapped in a blanket provided by a local constable, sat on a low wall, her eyes fixed on her twin, Abigail, who stood handcuffed nearby, guarded by 2 officers. The sisters had not spoken, but their shared glance carried a weight of grief and recognition. Lady Margaret Ashford, Charles Renwick, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, and Dr. Edmund Lyle stood apart, each grappling with their role in the tragedy. The butler, William, had slipped away to assist the fire brigade, though Poirot suspected he too carried unspoken burdens. Inspector Japp, summoned by Poirot's earlier call, approached with his usual gruff efficiency. "Blimey, Poirot," he said, surveying the wreckage. "You've outdone yourself this time. A murder, a fire, and a family vendetta? Care to explain?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "Mon ami, it is simple, yet complex. A child, Abigail Vance, was torn from her family 50 years ago, betrayed by those her father trusted. Lady Margaret, James Renwick, perhaps Edward Harrow. She returned seeking vengeance, and poor Clara paid the price. The fire was her final act, but the truth, it saved Eleanor and stopped her hand." Japp scratched his head. "And these lot?" He gestured to the group. "They're mixed up in it." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice low. "Their silence, their greed, or their fear fueled the blood debt. They will face questions, perhaps not in court, but in their souls. Abigail, she will answer for Clara's death, but I trust the law will see her pain as well as her crime." Eleanor rose, unsteady but determined, and approached Abigail. The officers stepped back, sensing the moment's gravity. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "All those years, I thought I was alone." Abigail's eyes, so fierce in the attic, softened with tears. "I wanted to protect you, Ellie. They took everything else, but not you. I lost my way." Eleanor reached out, touching her sister's hand briefly before the officers led Abigail to a waiting car. Poirot watched, his heart heavy but satisfied. The truth had reunited them, however briefly, and that was a victory against the darkness. He turned to the others, his gaze piercing. "You came to Blackthorn Hall seeking absolution or answers, but you found neither. The past is not erased by denial. Madame Ashford," he addressed Lady Margaret, whose defiance had crumbled. "You knew of the child's fate, did you not?" Her lips trembled, but she nodded. I suspected. Arthur's accusations were wild, but there was truth in them. I said nothing to protect my family. And you, Monsieur Harrow," Poirot continued, "your father, Edward, was part of this circle. Did he confess?" Mr. Harrow bowed his head. "He hinted at a mistake, a deal gone wrong. I thought it was just talk." Charles Renwick, his bravado gone, spoke quietly. "My grandfather's letters mentioned a debt, but I didn't understand. I'm sorry." Dr. Lyle, clutching his coat, added, "I only wanted to study the story, not live it." Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. Your regrets change nothing, but your honesty may yet redeem you. Go, face your lives and do better." As the group dispersed, Japp clapped Poirot's shoulder. "You're a miracle, Poirot. How do you untangle these messes?" "With method, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes on the horizon. "And with faith that truth, however dark, brings light." He walked to Eleanor, who stood alone, watching the car carrying Abigail disappear. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "you have lost much, but you have found a sister. Hold to that." Eleanor nodded, a tear falling. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for everything." As Poirot made his way to the car that would take him back to London, the ruins of Blackthorn Hall loomed behind, a monument to a debt paid in full. The darkness had lifted, not with triumph, but with quiet resolution. For Hercule Poirot, it was enough.